We meet a lot of people as we go about our day, but not all of them are wired the same way. A fair number have to deal with a condition known as Asperger's syndrome. Asperger's syndrome is a condition on the autism spectrum. It is typically characterized by hypersensitivity, as well as difficulties with social interaction and nonverbal communication. Those affected also tend to display a restricted range of behaviors and interests. Asperger's syndrome was first characterized by an Austrian physician named Hans Asperger. During the time he discovered the patterns for this condition, the Nazis were currently in power. At first, upon discovering these differences in behavior, he assisted in euthanizing them. Over time, he began to observe several benefits to these differences. He would go on to emphasize these positive traits to prevent more of these children from being killed. Asperger's work caught the attention of an English psychologist named Lorna Wing. Wing introduced the condition to the English-speaking community by identifying cases that matched Asperger's report. She also looked further into the condition and made some corrections to Asperger's initial findings. For instance, where Asperger believed that the condition would be unrecognizable until age 3, Wing suggested that difficulties could also be displayed within the first 2 years of one's life. I was first diagnosed with Asperger's syndrome in 2004. My family and I have been learning about it and how to properly deal with the condition ever since. I remember starting to take medication in 3rd grade to help me stay focused on tasks, and my parents signing me up for a local gymnastics team to help with my physical coordination.
I first noticed something was different about Andrew when he was very little, maybe like a year old, and he would line up all his crayons and he would line up all his little cars. And we just thought he was being precise and particular about his toys, but we came later to find out that is a symptom when they're trying to diagnose somebody with autism. And he also was very grown up in his words when he finally started speaking. After Andrew was in school for a couple years, there were teachers who were concerned about general things, and we finally ended up taking him to Arkansas Children's Hospital for some testing. But of course I had already got on the internet and looked a lot of things up, and when they said he had Asperger's syndrome, I was completely unsurprised because it was basically textbook to the symptoms that they talked about.
While my family and I were the ones most affected, it was also a learning experience for my teachers, since for some of them I was their first student with Asperger's. Sean O'Kelly is a band director at Owasso High School, and I was his student for 5 years.
So in my years as a teacher, I teach grades 6 through 12, and I've had students that have Asperger's at all age levels, and my experience with them varies a lot based on their age. And you think about lots of times society looks at societal behavior norms through the lens of society. And young kids, when you think about 6th graders, those bound in societal norms have not been established yet because kids are kids. And I find when I have students that have Asperger's, of course, in the school process, you receive a 504 or an IEP for a student in that situation. And many times I'm surprised when I get the 504 or the IEP for an Asperger's student because they're just a kid. And in an activity-based class such as band that I teach, a lot of it is not just a matter of sit down, do your homework, turn it in, that sorts of things. It's very activity-based, it's very project-based, very scaffolded. And students with Asperger's tend to do really well in those experiences because it's their first experience in a structured activity during the school day. Most of school before 6th grade band is sit at your desk and conform to whatever norms have been established for the classroom. Well, the classroom norms in an activity class are do things. And frequently I find young students particularly, they're just so happy to be a part of something that's different. That there's a wide variance of student response to that.
I can safely say that he was right. When I joined marching band, it felt a lot more gratifying. It felt much better when I could get up and do something rather than just sit there. While my peers and instructors were understanding, I still had my fair share of problems in high school.
In high school, sometimes he would have problems with long-term projects because Asperger's involves executive function, which sometimes there will be a deficit in planning, long-term planning, and breaking down a larger task into smaller parts. So if it came to a research paper or anything that required multiple steps and future planning, we would have to really walk him through step by step to keep him on task. His other problem would be sometimes is just following all of the directions instead of part of the directions, which would result in grades that looked either like 100 or 0. It was sort of all or nothing. If he had all of the information, he would be able to do everything. But if he missed just one little piece of the directions, then we would get in trouble.
In college, I've continued to struggle with big projects. Each new assignment gives me an opportunity to practice breaking down assignments into their separate parts and planning ahead to meet my deadline. One of my instructors can personally attest to this improvement. Dr. Julieta Vusa is a professor at Rogers State University and has frequently been an instructor throughout my college career.
So what I noticed was that you didn't tend to socialize a lot, right? So there are times that you did keep to yourself, right? And how did I accommodate? What I did was I gave you a lot of positive feedback. I usually give my students positive feedback anyway, but I believe that I did show you that I was really interested in your work. And I was. I mean, you had some interesting choices in terms of research. In fact, I remember that was global. You had an amazing presentation. But here's one thing that I liked, and I guess, and I didn't even have to accommodate you for that. You sometimes struggled when you're starting to do your presentations. I remember that, right? And then somewhere along the way, you would actually sort of get better. But your writing, you are a good writer, right? So that's one thing that I remember, being a really good writer. But I'll be honest with you, in terms of accommodating you, maybe when it came to just presentations, right? Just to give you time, because you needed time to start. Remember, with your introduction, you kind of needed time to sort of jog your memory and sort of start. And then once you started, got comfortable, and you just carried through. Yeah, so I didn't really have to accommodate you as much as I guess we expected to do, because I believed in you. I knew you had it in you, and I believe in you because of the writing. The writing spoke to me.
While having Asperger's can make social interaction more difficult, this does not mean it's impossible to make some friends.
I personally haven't really seen any extraordinary difference. If there's anything that I think that I highlighted in your own personality, I think it's you're really good at go-getting, and once you actually find something you want to do, you get it done. The hardest part, maybe there's if there are some disadvantages, I would see maybe more prolonged on starting it out if you're not as comfortable with it, like an actual subject, or if you need some more answers to actually go on forward, then you'll ask them, but it takes time. So after it does actually, once you get the role going, once you get started, I think it's a really good outcome. Other than that, I haven't really seen anything other than being super personable. If you have something that me and you have already had, like we went to high school at Owasso together, and we've already kind of known each other, so it made it a little easier to actually, I don't know, I guess when we're in classes, it's easier to communicate to each other, help each other out, get through it. And if we're needing some help, I'll ask you, you'll ask me, vice versa. And it's really cool to know that there's somebody that's either able to do that for you or looking out for you in general. But you've always been there for me too. We've had audio prod, we've had multiple classes, and over those classes you can always see the first person to ask a question. It's not just Andrew, but he's got a good question, and it's well, it pertains to everybody as well as your own future projects. And that's definitely, at least like I said, highlighted in your own life.
Many with Asperger's wouldn't consider pursuing a communications degree. Through my studies, I have learned more about myself and how to thrive in the world as I leave college and pursue a career. I'm going to be graduating soon. Now that I'm on my way out, I can rest assured knowing I put a good number of academic and social challenges behind me. However, seeing as how I'm moving on to a new stage in my life, there's probably going to be a lot more. While living with Asperger's syndrome can be tricky, it is not impossible. As the people you have seen can attest to, having this condition ultimately doesn't place any major limitations on those affected. With a little patience, they'll fit right in.